Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good evening. It is 10 o'clock p.m. here in Calgary, Alberta, Wednesday night, February 6th. I'm happy to be here. This is Child Abuse Prevention and Human Rights Abuse Prevention is Up to Us. 30-minute live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. And thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I appreciate everybody who's listening to the shows and taking the time to do that. I do a lot of shows, and it's hard to keep up with them all. And thanks, everybody, for being here to support me on this. And we left off Monday night talking about the dysfunctional families from a particular website, so that's what we'll continue on with tonight. I'm not a counselor or therapist. I don't hold any certificates in those areas, and I'm just a private citizen paying to do my own blog talk shows, and mainly because I want to speak out against child abuse and speak up, stand up for child rights, and be another voice for survivors out here. I know there's so many survivors who cannot come forward for many reasons. Cannot come forward with their, to disclose the abuse, and so many survivors. It's horrific, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. The issue is silence, right? That's the huge problem with child abuse. It's an issue of silence. The whole world wants it silenced because nobody wants to deal with it. But the sad fact is that so many children right now are having to deal with it because that's their reality. They're being abused in every way, and so many of us have had this happen to us in our childhoods, in our youth, and it's just unfortunate. Never should happen. And if we don't stand up and speak out against it, then we're just basically saying, oh, well, it's no big deal. And it is a big deal. It's a huge big deal. And that's why I figured, hey, I've got nothing better to do with my time than to be another voice out here speaking out against child abuse and really promoting, awareness and education regarding the issues of what happens to children when they are abused and then grow up and have to deal with a lot of adult issues and adult survivor issues. And I cover most of that stuff on my One Child Abuse Survivor to Another in the morning. And but I wanted to talk about this article about dysfunctional families because many people, don't realize the damage done, from a child growing up in a dysfunctional family. If they don't get any help, it can be a serious problem for these kids. And so many people do grow up in dysfunctional homes, even if there isn't any abuse. Any real abuse, like physical abuse, sexual abuse, and whatnot, verbal abuse, emotional abuse. The dysfunctional family roles are still played, regardless. And so I think this particular article is very interesting. So you have to listen at your own discretion to all of my shows. I'm talking about the subjects of abuse, child abuse, domestic violence, and whatnot, all types of abuse. It's a very sensitive subject. And so you have to listen at your own discretion. You ultimately are responsible for what you listen to, and you have to know what's going to make you uncomfortable. And, it is ultimately your decision when you listen to something. So you make sure that you're in a safe place and feeling okay with the material whenever you're listening to any program on any media outlet, whether it's the radio, the television, the internet, and you make sure that you're okay with that information. And, it is clearly your discretion. So you have to turn the show off if it makes you uncomfortable. And young people under the age of 18, I just ask that you have permission from an adult, a parent, caregiver, somebody who can help you make the decision whether you should be listening to the shows. I don't know how young the people are who are listening to the shows. So you have to have permission to listen to my shows and keep yourself safe when you're online, right? There's all kinds of great information out there. If you haven't gotten that information and you don't know how to keep yourself safe online and you're a young person under the age of 18, make sure that you do get that information because you do not want to be a victim of a child sexual predator or pedophile, and you want to keep yourself safe when you're online, and you have the right to protection and the right to safety, right? And so I believe in protecting children's lives. I'm standing up to try to save children's lives, and that's what I'll be doing for the rest of my life. And so, it's really important for me to say this on every show because I don't know how young the people are who are listening to my shows. So make sure you do keep yourself protected. And if you're a parent out there and you don't know how to protect your children, online or offline, make sure you do get that information and do all you can to protect your children, right? It's just so important because there's so many really sick and crazy individuals out there. That's why this is happening. That's why we see rolling up all the time of children who have been abused, whether it's in their own homes or whether it's at a school, daycare, at a store. People are getting a hold of children and abusing them wherever they're at. So, if you're a parent and you haven't really gotten the information on how to protect your children, make sure you do get all the information you can because this is a sad reality for so many children, and you do not want it to become your reality, right? Because then it will become your nightmare, and you don't want that to happen to you. So make sure you keep yourself safe at all times, right? So we're going to get right into this article. I found this article from This particular article, it's called When You Grow Up in a Dysfunctional Family. It was written by George A. Boyd. It's from the Mudrashram Institute of Spiritual Studies. That's www.mudrashram, mudrashram.com/dysfunctional family number 2.html. And I did pop that into the chat room, so if anybody's sitting in the chat room and wants to check that out. And we have Sandra McLeish here with us. Hello, Sandra. And this particular article is really quite interesting. We read through quite a bit of it already, talking about dysfunctional families. And George A. Boyd was saying that when you grow up in a dysfunctional family, you experience trauma and pain from your parents' actions, words, and attitudes. Because of the trauma you experienced, you grew up changed, different from other children, missing important parts of necessary parenting that prepare you for adulthood, right? And all kinds of unnatural roles are played, within the family. They said that, if you don't get help with that, it can cause all kinds of problems. It says others, have felt inner rage or inner anxiety or rage and don't know why, they feel that way, right? And that children are innocent. It says you were innocent and your life was changed dramatically by forces in your family you had no control over, and now you're an adult survivor of that trauma. And this article will discuss what these families are like, what is the impact of growing up in these families, and what you can do to begin the process of healing. So this is really interesting material, and I think it's worth checking out for anybody who may have grown up in a dysfunctional, environment. It is good to get help with this, right? There's all kinds of roles that people take on, very dysfunctional roles, and children are given these roles by their caregivers and parents to play these roles, and if you don't get help with it, you might continue to play them all the way through your adulthood. And I did a lot of looking into this, like I was saying on Monday night's show, checking out John Bradshaw's book and John Bradshaw's website, and there was a whole bunch of material sort of linked to John Bradshaw's book and his website regarding the dysfunctional roles that people end up playing and the toxic shame and whatnot. Just really good information for people who have survived in this kind of, and have grown up and are now adult survivors and having to deal with this stuff. So I did a whole lot of work on this already, looking back at this last year. And if you need any of that information, you can get a hold of me here on Blog Talk Radio, or if you can't find it yourself, just by typing in John Bradshaw or dysfunctional families or toxic shame, things like that. That'll bring you to websites that talk about this stuff, right? So they said that these roles, we actually left off talking about the roles that people will, as children, will take on because they're sort of forced into it, right? They're given these roles. So there's the hero role, the scapegoat role, and the lost child role, the mascot role. And these are roles that children are kind of given a part to play in the family, depending on which one they come in as. They said the hero, who is usually the oldest child, is characteristically over-responsible and an overachiever, because they're usually the oldest child. See, the hero allows the family to be reassured it's doing well, as it can always look to the achievements of the oldest son or daughter as a source of pride and esteem. And it says, while the hero may excel in school, be a leader on the football team or a cheerleader, obtaining well-paying employment, inwardly she's suffering from painful feelings of inadequacy and guilt, as nothing that he or she does is good enough to heal his family's pain. So the hero's compulsive drive to succeed may in turn lead to stress-related illness and compulsive overworking. So this is something that can happen to the children who take on that hero role or who are given that hero role by the parents or caregivers. The scapegoat, says here, who is often the second-born, characteristically acts out in anger and defiance, often behaving in delinquent ways, but inwardly he or she feels hurt in that the family's attention has gone to the dependent or the hero, and he or she has been ignored. The scapegoat's poor performance in school, experimentation with drugs, alcohol, promiscuous sexuality, flaunting of conventions of society, or involvement in adolescent gangs or criminal activity may lead him or her to be labeled the family's problem, drawing attention away from the addiction or the codependency, right? This behavior can also be seen as a cry for help, and it is often the delinquency of the scapegoat that leads the entire family into treatment. The acting out behavior of the scapegoat may bring with it substance abuse or addiction to alcohol or drugs, early pregnancy for which he or she is not prepared, or incarceration. The hostile and irresponsible attitude of the scapegoat may lead him or her into accidents or acts of violence against others or self. The attitude of defiance may lead him or her to do poorly in school, affecting future employment and the opportunity to earn an adequate income. The scapegoat's cleverness and manipulation may be used to engage in leadership of peer groups or in the invention of schemes of dubious legality or outright criminality to earn a livelihood. It says, though the scapegoat may develop social skills with his or her own circle of peers, the relationships he or she experiences tend to be shallow and inauthentic. And the scapegoat, cast in the role of a rebel, may have lost touch with his spiritual potentials and morality. So that's kind of interesting to look at. They said it's usually the second born, the scapegoat. So if there's 2 children, then it would be the second child born. Or if there's 4 children, it would be, the second born, third born, right? The scapegoats are the ones that are sort of in the middle, right? And that's not every child, but this would be in a dysfunctional family. We're talking, this is about dysfunctional families, dysfunctional homes, dysfunctional environments, right? The lost child role is characterized by shyness, solitariness, and isolation. Inwardly, he or she feels like an outsider in the family, ignored by parents and siblings, and feels lonely. And the lost child seeks the privacy of his or her own company to be away from the family chaos and may have a rich fantasy life in which he or she withdraws. The lost child often has poor communication skills, difficulties with intimacy and informing relationships, and may have confusion or conflicts about his or her sexual identity and functioning. These children may be seen to seek attention by getting sick, asthma, allergies, or by bedwetting. Lost children may attempt to self-nurture by overeating, leading to problems with obesity, or to drown their sorrows in alcohol or drug use. The solitude of a lost child may be conducive to the development of his or her spirituality and creative mental pursuits. If low self-esteem does not shut down all efforts at achievement, the lost child often has few friendships and commonly has difficulty finding a marriage partner. Instead, he or she may attempt to find comfort in his or her material possessions or a pet. And this pattern of escape may also lead him or her to avoid seeking professional help, and so may remain stuck in his or her social isolation. So these are just some roles that, they talk about that, can happen within a dysfunctional family, right? The mascot role is manifested by clowning and hyperactivity. The mascot, often the youngest child, seeks to be the center of attention in the family, often entertaining the family and making everyone feel better through his or her comedy and zaniness. The mascot, in turn, may be overprotected and shielded from the problems of life. Inwardly, the mascot experiences intense anxiety and fear and may persist in immature patterns of behavior well into adulthood. Instead of dealing with problems, the mascot may run away from them by changing the subject or clowning. And the mascot uses fun to evoke laughter in his or her circle of friends, but is often not taken seriously or is subjected to rejection and criticism. The mascot commonly has difficulty concentrating and focusing in a sustained way on learning and may develop learning deficits as a result. And they said here, the mascot also may fear turning within or looking honestly at his or her feelings or behavior, so he or she may be out of touch with his or her inner feelings and his or her spirituality. The frenetic social activity that the mascot expresses is, in fact, often a defense against his or her intense inner anxiety and tension. And the inability to cope with the inner fear and tension leads many mascots to believe they are going crazy. If this inner anxiety and desperation is not addressed, it is not uncommon that a mascot may slip deeper into mental illness, become chemically dependent, or even commit suicide. They said a special case is the only child. An only child in an alcoholic family may take on parts of all of these roles, playing them simultaneously or alternatively, experiencing overwhelming pain and confusion as a result. And they said here, Sharon Wegscheider notes that the longer a person plays a role, the more rigidly fixed he or she becomes in it. Eventually, family members become addicted to their roles, seeing them as essential to their survival and playing them with the same compulsion, delusion, and denial as the dependent plays his or her role as a drinker, if they're alcoholics, or as a drug user if they're dependent on substance abuse users. And that's the thing. I think what it is, they become addicted to their roles. That's what they said here. I think what it is you get so used to playing those roles. If that's what you grew up with, like when you grow up in a dysfunctional home and it's always been dysfunctional, and you start your first day of life in that home and you grow up in that and you don't see anything else really, and you're not really introduced to anything else, those are the roles that you will naturally be given, and you will just take those on because that's all you know. And until you get away from that and you start to see some of the behaviors and how distorted they were and how dysfunctional they were within the family and what you were made to do as playing your role out in that family, how your family members actually still see you today, if they're still living or if you have any contact with them, you can really see if you actually step outside the box and are able to take a look at it, sometimes with the help of, like a counselor or a therapist or somebody who can really show you these things, or even self-help, which is what I've done. You can see the real dysfunctional, stuff that you were kind of forced to be in on, and actually at the time you were just doing what you had always been doing, which is just playing this role. And so many times people, if they don't stop to take a look at those behaviors, like I'm talking about my own family, for instance, I've got 2 siblings that are still living and the rest are all gone, but 2 of my siblings are still alive, and they just live their lives the same as they did before. They haven't changed their opinions on much. They never did change that role playing that they started from the very beginning. And it's just because they don't see that they need to. They don't see that there's anything wrong with their codependency, with their dysfunction. They just think that that's just life. That's the way it is, right? And so without getting help or realizing that they need help, they just continue to play those roles out. And I decided to get rid of my role, and I created a new role script for myself, which is much healthier and much better for me as far as my mental health goes, physical health goes, and everything else, right? But that's because I recognized it and was able to make some changes. But not everybody can do that, and I think that's why it's so important for people to get help. Because sometimes we don't. I had things pointed out to me also by certain individuals, life coaches, psychologists and counselors who I would talk to. Who I never had any therapy, but I've actually been very blessed to be able to talk to a few psychologists and counselors out there, therapists and whatnot, who have just talked to me as a friend, right? And, pointed out some things that I might be doing to self-sabotage, which I didn't recognize. And so sometimes we don't see these things, and sometimes we need help with these things, right? So it's so important for people to realize there's nothing wrong with getting help. There's absolutely nothing wrong with reaching out and getting help when we need it. The sad thing is when people don't get help, that's when the real problem starts. Because many of my family members, obviously almost all of my family members, did not get any help, really. I mean, none of us got any help. I'm the first one to ever really say, hey, I'm getting help. I'm the last born, and everybody else just decided to live their lives in this, playing those roles out, in this denial, in this dysfunction, and thinking, well, this is just my life, and this is just the way it is, and it's never going to change. And they didn't try to make any changes. They didn't try to to heal or to learn how, that there are healthier ways to do things. There's healthier thought processes, healthier boundaries, healthier everything, right? So sometimes people won't change. They won't take those steps to change. And that's unfortunate because 2 of my brothers are dead. One committed suicide, and the other one really committed suicide as well because he was do so many pills, for so long. Like he did pills from the time he was like 12. He used to do bags full of pills, and he did that all the way up into his late 30s. And the drug use over the years was just killing him. He was on the streets quite often, and he was almost always homeless and always in and out of prison, and lost, fingers to frostbite, and was really, living on the streets. And he wouldn't get any help. And my other brother killed himself outright, suicide. And, the rest of my family just continued on in their dysfunction. And we all knew that we needed help because my parents were brought up on abuse charges, right? So we all went to counseling, and the social workers were involved and whatnot. And as we grew up and we grew older, we were still in the home. We were not removed from the home. We should have been removed from the home, but we weren't. And sadly enough, who do I blame? My parents, right? I don't blame CPS for that. I blame my parents because my parents were to blame. They were the one wielding the abuse. You know what I mean? They were the ones responsible for that abuse. They were the ones who should have been responsible to get their family some help. When the court said, if the children are going to remain in the home, you have to get counseling. You're going to have to get your children counseling. You're going to have to get your own selves counseling because both of my parents were mentally ill and abused as children. And, the courts ordered that they should get counseling. Well, they went to 2 sessions, and that was it. And, they just weaseled their way out of it, you know what I mean? And it's, they were very manipulative, very weaselly, right? Abusive types, right? And figured that, why should they change their behavior? right? Poor me, that was their behavior. I was abused as a child. In the meantime, they're kicking the crap out of their own children and thinking, oh, there's nothing wrong with that. We can treat our children however we want. You know, my mom did not. My mom used to complain because my grandmother used to horsewhip her, like with a horsewhip, right? And my mom would say, my mother beat me with a horsewhip, and you know, horsewhipped me half to death, you know. And she'd be crying the blues about that, and then she would beat me with a rolling pin and crack my head open, or you know, almost break my nose, or you know, really practically break my nose and cause me to have, you know, bleeding that would not stop, and serious blood loss and stuff. You know, my mom used to spill my blood, right? So, you know, this is coming from somebody who used to complain because she was abused, and then who could turn around and completely nearly kill her own child. So there was a lot of dysfunction, a lot of mental illness, and the sad thing is when people refuse to get help. That's where the real shame lies, because it's like, okay, you have, as an adult, it is your responsibility. It was their responsibility as adults to make the right and proper decisions, right? And so we, as adult survivors, it is our responsibility to get that help. And if we don't, we have no one to blame but ourselves, because it is ultimately our responsibility. What happened to us as children was not. We can't, you know, we can't control that as children. You know, growing up in these abusive homes, you know, you can't control what's happening to you there, right? I mean, you're going along with whatever's being dished out to you, and you're being forced to go along with it and try to survive in it. But as an adult, you know, you become an adult, it is your responsibility, because who else can do it for you? Nobody, right? So we have to get help with this stuff, right? And so my family, I mean, they're not on the healing journey with me. My family, right, the rest of my family that's living, you know, they're not with me on this, right? They're very much still in their own absolute crazed dysfunction, and I refuse to be a part of it anymore. But that's because I threw away the old script and I got myself a new life script, which is so much, like I said, it's so much healthier, so much better, and you know, so it does separate me from my dysfunctional family. But the thing is that's okay, because I'm healing, you know what I mean? I'm getting better, and they're going to continue on in their dysfunction. Well, that's their own choice, right? They're choosing to do that. It's unfortunate, but that's the way it goes. So they said types of dysfunctional families. Dr. Janet Kizier, Kizziar, characterizes 4 types of troubled family systems, which are breeding grounds for codependency. And so the first one they list here is the alcoholic or chemically dependent family system. The second one, the emotionally or psychologically disturbed family system. The third one, the physically or sexually abusing family system. And the fourth one, the religious fundamentalist or rigidly dogmatic family system. So in all of this, my family was all of that. The alcoholic, chemically dependent family system, the emotionally, psychologically disturbed family. You know, my family was alcoholic. My family, they weren't alcoholics, the siblings were. But my parents were, you know, mentally ill. And my dad was quite often drinking things with alcohol in it. Like, he would drink bottles of NyQuil, right? And take lots and lots of pills, mainly painkillers and stuff like this. You know, they were always trying to pop pills. That's kind of where my brothers kind of got that popping the pills thing, because my parents were popping pills, you know, and probably talking about all the pills that they were popping all the time. And so my brothers just kind of my dad was always trying to force this stuff off on us, right? So I didn't trust my dad. I thought he was going to try to kill us, because he was always talking about killing the family, and that he should kill us all, that he could poison us, or he could kill us all when we were sleeping. So I never really slept that well, because I was always concerned that he was going to kill us in our sleep, because he used to threaten to do that. And so, you know, if he was handing you something, you had to be a little careful, because you thought, well, is he poisoning us? Or especially if he was trying to give it to all the siblings, then it's kind of like, is he trying to give us all something so that he'll poison us and we'll die in our sleep? Or maybe, you know, this is something that used to run through our minds. We were very much aware that my dad was very, very mentally ill and could kill us, right? So we were very alert and aware of that. So whenever he would try to give me something like to drink or to take, I just wouldn't do it. I wouldn't go along with it, and I'd throw a fit, and I'd usually catch a beating, but a beating was better than possibly being poisoned, you know what I mean? Sadly enough, that's the way dysfunctional and psychologically disturbed families run. And physically, sexually abusing family members, absolutely. The religious fundamentalist, rigidly dogmatic family system, absolutely. My parents were completely twisted and completely not good parents, right? And so many people go through this, and this is the sad part, and this is why it's so important that, you know, if you are a survivor out there, most of my survivor stuff I do on my morning show, One Child to Be Survivor to Another, but I really wanted to cover this particular article about dysfunctional families on my evening show, because it is really you know, it's a breeding grounds for abuse. You know, it's a breeding grounds for all kinds of problems for children. And so, you know, it's so important that people realize if you're a parent and you're not providing a stable home and stable environment for your child, you need to be, and you need to get help with that, right? Because your children are counting on you to provide a safe and stable as possible environment for them, you know. And if you can't do that because you're mentally ill or you got substance abuse problems or you were abused and so you can't cope and you got mental issues and whatever else is going on in your life, you need to find some help, you know what I mean? Because your children should not pay for your inabilities to be a good parent. Like, we should have never paid, six siblings and myself, it was 7 children, we should not have had to pay because of our parents couldn't figure it out. You know, our parents did not show love towards each other or towards us. We shouldn't have had to pay for that. You know what I mean? But sadly enough, we did. We paid for our parents' problems. And no child should ever have to pay for a parent's problems. Parents are the ones that they're the adults in the situation, and they need to take full responsibility and do the right things by their children. I'm just real sick and tired of people messing up their kids and then, you know, crying the blues and saying, well, what did I do? You know what I mean? It's like, no, take responsibility and do the right thing by your kids, right? They are really counting on it, and they need it. They said codependency expresses in these dysfunctional families through the typical strategies of minimizing, projecting the blame, intellectualizing, and denial. Minimizing acknowledges there may be a problem but makes light of it. Projection blames the problem on others and may appoint a scapegoat to bear the family shame. Intellectualizing tries to explain the problem away, believing that by offering a convenient excuse or explanation, the problem will be resolved. And denial demands that other people and self believe there is no problem, right? The patterns of codependency can emerge from a family system where the overt and covert rules close its members off from the outside world. And these family systems discourage healthy communication of issues and feelings between themselves, destroy the family members' ability to trust themselves and to trust another in an intimate relationship, and freeze family members into unnatural roles, making constructive change difficult. Rules that encourage the unnatural patterns of relating in these codependent family systems include, number one, they list off a whole bunch here. Don't talk about problems. Don't express feelings openly or honestly. Communicate indirectly through acting out or sulking or via another family member. Have unrealistic expectations about what the dependent will do for you. Don't be selfish. Think of the other person first. Don't take your parents as an example. Do as I say, not as I do. Don't have fun. Don't rock the boat. Keep the status quo. Don't talk about sex, and don't challenge your partner's religious beliefs or these family rules. So there's just no way to communicate, and it's so you know, everyone's kept unable to even communicate in that family, right, when that's going on. The dysfunctional family dynamics engendered by these unrealistic and restrictive rules leads to unfulfilling relationships as adults. And this leads, Dr. Kizier believes, to the symptomatic characteristics of codependency in adult relationship styles, marked by difficulty in accurately identifying and expressing feelings, problems in forming and maintaining close, intimate relationships, higher than normal prevalence of marrying a person from another dysfunctional family or a person with active alcoholism or addiction, perfectionism, having unrealistic expectation of self and others and being too hard on oneself, rigidity in behavior and attitudes, having an unwillingness to change, having a resistance to adapting to change and fearful of taking risks, feeling over-identified or responsible for others' feelings or behavior, right? Having a constant need for approval or attention from others to feel good about themselves, awkwardness in making decisions, feel terrified of making mistakes and may defer decision-making to others, feeling powerless and ineffective, like whatever they do does not make a difference, exaggerated feelings of shame and worthlessness and low self-esteem, avoiding conflict at any price and will often repress their own feelings and opinions to keep the peace. There's just so many. It just goes on and on. We're going to continue on with this on Friday. So thanks, everybody, for being here. I appreciate it. And thanks a lot, Sandra, for hanging in here and joining me here tonight. I'll be on tomorrow morning, One Child to Be Survivor to another, 6 o'clock a.m., same time, same place. If you need some information or any of the information that I've had on my shows and you just don't know what the links are or you want to get a hold of me for information, please get a hold of me. I always know what I've been talking about, and I have the links to what I've been talking about. And have a great night, everybody. Take good care of yourselves, and look out for the children in your own lives to make sure that they are not being abused, right? And do all you can to protect them. people always say, oh, it doesn't do any good to call, the police when they're, they never do anything anyway, and then CPS never does anything right anyway. Well, you know how many children's lives are saved because CPS is around? Take a thought about that. For everyone that slips through the crack, they save about 150 children's lives. So some do slip through the cracks. It's very sad. The system needs revamp. But if you don't phone, you may be the last person that sees that child alive. This happened in a case up here in Calgary a few years back. It's been quite a few years now. But people heard these little babies crying and screaming because they were left alone in an apartment for 3 or 4 days with no water, no food. And these little babies died. And the people didn't phone. You know why? Because they didn't want to get involved. So you may be the very last person that might hear a child or be able to save a child's life. So you make the phone call. You do the right thing, right? Have a great night, everybody. We'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.